You have played one of the most iconic horror villains ever. What was it like becoming Michael Myers?
This figure that's unstoppable, that's unknowable, that doesn't show emotion. It's a faceless figure. There was a certain connection that happened every time I put that mask on. It wasn't me anymore. So if you were actively manifesting the universe bringing you what you desired, and it happened to come in the form of a lottery, you listened to your dream state, you paid attention, right? You were an active participant in the manifestation of that lottery. That is would be very close to what it is I experience in actively manifesting this particular gold mine, that I've entered, that is a part of my life now.
Welcome to Lottery Dreams and Fortune. So I am so excited to be joined here right now with James Jude Courtney. He is an actor. He has played one of the most iconic roles in the history of horror films, Michael Myers, in the 2018 film Halloween, as well as its two sequels, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, which just came out in 2022. He's been in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He is a filmmaker. He's a very inspiring person. I'm so excited to welcome James Jude Courtney here to the program today. How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time. You have played one of the most iconic horror villains ever, Michael Myers. Many people are familiar with his character, but for people that are not, who is this character and what was it like to play him?
It's interesting because this character was created by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill back, and the first film was made in 1978. And it was one of those game-changing films. I was in college at the time. I knew I was going to make movies for a living. So I went to watch films with a different eye, I think. And there were films of that era, Rocky, Star Wars, and Halloween, that really changed, sort of the trajectory of film as we know it. And I remember walking out of all three of those films going, oh, wow, that's a game changer. And the beauty of what Deborah Hill and John Carpenter created in this character was, the thing that appeals to the subconscious of all of us, of our fears, of this figure that's unstoppable, that's unknowable, that doesn't show emotion. It's a faceless figure. And Nick Castle, who played the original, it was like capturing light in a bottle, and lightning in a bottle, and so it started this whole new wave of horror films. And so to, flash forward when David Gordon Green and Danny McBride decided to jump in with Universal and Blumhouse to make these three films, they were moved by the fact that, we all have a Halloween story. And so, the idea being that it's socially relevant. What they were creating was socially relevant. And when I got the call to play the role, for me, I never thought about it because, my father was airborne, Army Airborne in Korea. He was a combat veteran, airborne, a stock car racer, very kind, deep, compassionate, spiritual man, but very mission-oriented. He raised 7 boys, my 6 brothers and I, with this sort of mentality, a mission-oriented mentality. So once you're given a mission, the mission is what's most important. Everything else is superfluous. So, getting the call to play this role, I watched the film one time, and what I did was I reached into Nick's soul, what he created when he created this character in 1978, and embracing the energy of what he created, I allowed that into my being. And then, of course, playing the character was filtered through all my years of acting experience and plant medicine and psychological work, emotional work, spiritual work, all the things that make me a man, make me a human, make me an actor, make me a stuntman. I don't know that I've even still really thought about it.
Wow. And I definitely want to get into your thoughts, deep dive into your spiritual beliefs and manifestation and intuition and that sort of thing. But before I get to that, because you're also a stuntman and you have survived 3,000 high falls, 7,000 sword fights. I mean, what led to getting this role in the first place? Was it serendipitous? What happened?
I think life is serendipitous, personally. First of all, in 4th grade, I knew I was going to make movies. I had epiphanies in 4th grade. It was a very, very important year for me. Somehow I figured out reincarnation and going to a Catholic school. I don't know where that came from, man. In fact, I started to raise my hand in class, and then I went, "Oh no, this is so not worth getting paddled over." My butt will not be red today. And I said nothing about it. But I knew I was going to make movies, so I went out to Los Angeles with the expectation that this was going to be my life. This is what I was going to do. I did a play called Requiem for a Heavyweight. We ran 9 weeks in Long Beach, and it ran one night in Broadway without me. John Lithgow played it there, and I met a wonderful acting coach who was in the cast. He was a former instructor at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. His name was Ron Ray. He was in tons of old movies, as a character actor, and he became my acting coach just out of the blue. I never intended to be a stuntman. I just intended to be an actor, and then eventually write and produce and do the things that we do when we make movies. But he got me an audition for a live show at Universal Studios called The Adventures of Conan. It's when Conan the Barbarian had come out. And then this beautiful, elaborate set with a fire-breathing dragon, and that's where I amassed my high falls and sword fights. I did a 20-foot high fall into a flaming pit, and I fought with double swords. And that show was, it was real, man. Like tons of concussions, thousands of stitches, literally. Those blades really rapidly became live because of the constant banging. They were really sharp, and a lot of very, very talented actor stuntmen were working on that. And so that's sort of how I fell into the whole concept of being an actor and a stuntman. So then I could do dialects. So if I hear a dialect, I can imitate it. So I could play an Australian or a Frenchman or a New Yorker, or, from the Bronx, or somebody from Mississippi, and get in a fight, or, slide a car or do a high fall. And so that's sort of how I fell into this sort of like this trench of expression.
And did you meet Arnold Schwarzenegger on that set of Conan the Barbarian? Because for people that aren't familiar, he was the star of that movie. How was that?
I did not meet him through the Conan show. I met him at his house several times. I was fortunate enough to be invited to parties, which he threw often. A wonderful man, wonderful, charming man. The wonder of that show was the people we did get to meet. Michael Jackson brought a gaggle of kids every other week to see the show. Through that show, like boxers especially were enamored with us, so they would come backstage afterwards. Sugar Ray, Marvin Hagler. In fact, of all the people I've met in my life, and I'm not going to name drop here, but you can imagine how many rock stars and movie stars and politicians and spiritual leaders I've met in my life. The only person I've ever been in awe of when I met him was Muhammad Ali. And when I met him, I'm an inch taller than he was, and yet I was looking up somehow, and just in awe of the man's presence, and also in awe of his ability to look you in the eye and make you feel like you're the only person in the room, even though you're surrounded by people. So we, and there were all kinds of, dignitaries that would come by and visit. It was a big show. It was so well done and so powerful, and it really set the stage for, the way I was blessed to make a living, for the next 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of working with and being around other notable people, even in this Halloween series, many fans know this, but for people that aren't familiar, Jamie Lee Curtis plays a huge role in that series. She plays the role of Laurie Strode. She's a legend. And also Andi Matichak, who is very well known as well, very famous actress. She's been in Blue Bloods, Orange is the New Black, and obviously the Halloween series. But what was it like working with Jamie Lee Curtis and Andi in these movies?
The highest compliment, I think, when you're in the movie industry, the highest compliment you can give another actor or another stuntman, anybody in the industry really, is to look them in the eye and say, "You're a real pro. You are a real pro." And that's exactly what those women, it's exactly how to describe them. They're just professionals, just on time, on their marks, incredibly generous. It's really, really difficult. It's really difficult work, and people who don't do this for a living might not understand the amount of focus it takes, and you really have to be on your game constantly. And then and the thing is you're doing multiple takes. You have to do them over and over and over, and then you don't work for a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half. But then when you call back to set or call in front of the camera, you've got to be on again. I mean, there's not much margin for error, and if you lose a day for some reason or another, you're looking at hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. I mean, so the pressure of showing up. And David Gordon Green is a director, an amazing director, probably hands down the best director I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some pretty amazing directors, including Ron Howard. The thing is when everybody on that set shows up, completely committed, completely focused, everything else in their world is left at home. It's such a high. It's such an incredible high. You're at the peak of your creativity. And, Jamie and I, when we did that big finale, we both agreed that that's the most powerful thing we've ever done in our movie career. Now, for me to say that, okay, yeah, it is. But for her to say that, with all the amazing things she's done, and the gamut of emotions she and I, ran through when we were doing that finale, prior to starting we shot that finale. It took about a week to shoot. So,
and this was in Halloween Ends?
Halloween Ends, right.
Okay.
So that's when she finally kills me. We walked off to the side and went beat by beat and how we were going to progress through the scene. And we both had tears like running down our cheeks. And through that process, we both experienced so much love, so much fear, so much, the desire to kill, the desire to die, like all these really human emotions, like, and this love affair between these two characters. And she and I had been working on this is our third movie together. So we really developed this incredibly deep spiritual relationship that was made manifest in that scene. I feel eternally blessed to have worked with those women. And by the way, I was raised by a powerful woman. My dad was. I characterize it like this. My dad was airborne in Korea. He was a stock car racer. My mom has bigger balls. Like, she raised 7 boys with my father. They had 27 foster babies from the time they were born until they were adopted. My mother has sung New Year's Day Mass for 2 different popes, 3 times in the Vatican, and in cathedrals all over Europe. She was a peace activist in Belfast, where they brought half Catholic, half Protestant kids from Belfast to Columbia, South Carolina, and then for a summer did outward bound programming. So a Catholic and a Protestant had to be together constantly. And she's been firebombed out of her lodgings in Belfast. I mean, so I have a deep appreciation for powerful women. And man, let me tell you, Jamie Lee Curtis is a poster child for an empowered woman. I just love that woman. And Andi and Judy are just incredible human beings, That's amazing.
I'm like a fly on the wall just listening to you. When you played this role of Michael Myers in these movies, so how does the mask work? I know a lot of people are curious about that. How do you breathe? Because this is a character that has a mask, at least that's what we see on screen. Is that prosthetics? Is that a mask that you wear? How do you breathe? What is that like?
Well, I'm wearing prosthetics because I have a prosthetic eye, and then I had, and for like 1.5 of the movie, or like 2 movies, 2.5, I have prosthetics over my fingers, and then so the prosthetics, and then I have all kinds of prosthetic scars and things that they put on. And for Halloween Ends, I had prosthetics all over my face because I spent much of that movie without the mask. But the mask itself is form fitted to my face, so they did a bust, of my head, and then they, Chris Nelson and his incredible team, Vince Van Dyke's. Created the 3 different masks. Because it is form fitted to my face, I can't put it on myself. It has to be applied to me. So I can tell you this, man, the first time I put on the mask for the very first time, it was during a rehearsal. We were rehearsing the very long tracking shot from Halloween 2018. And Chris had just flown in from Los Angeles, walks in. It was very dramatic. He walks in with this leather Halliburton, looks like it's from a 1940s like detective movie. And we all go to a back room, the stunt coordinator, David Gordon Green, the director, Danny McBride, Malika Akkad, who owns the franchise, and myself, and the cinematographer, Michael Simmons. And we all go back because we want to see, what's going to be the effect of this. No one's really seen it yet. So Chris places me in a doorway where the lighting is just right, and then he pulls one of the mask out, and he applies it to me, and there was a collective, like this guttural sound that just happened. Everybody in the room was moved by it, and for me, it was like a million amp connection. It was like boom, like it just the connection was complete. It's mystical, and if you look at the way the ancient Greeks portrayed, the theater acting, they believed that they were channeling spirits and that the masks held the power of those spirits. And I can tell you 100% that I identify with that. There was a certain connection that happened every time I put that mask on. It wasn't me anymore. It wasn't me. There was another entity in me, and there was just enough of me up in my little editor's box to keep from hurting people, to keep from getting hurt, to catch my lights, to make, hit my marks, to do the technical things you have to do when you're acting, when you're doing stunts, when you're doing anything in front of a camera. Wow, incredibly powerful, and very difficult to breathe on a practical level. Difficult to breathe, especially when you're being very physical. Incredibly hot, but all that discomfort is a part of the character. All that adds to what you're doing when you create a character like that.
You mentioned that it was that you felt that this presence, this energy coming into you. What do you mean by that? How did this energy, this presence come into you? What was it like becoming Michael Myers?
Well, okay, let me preface it by explaining how I created the character. A wonderful old character actor named Ted Knight, Caddyshack, Mary Tyler Moore Show, incredibly talented guy, funny as hell. I met him in the early '80s before I was even cast in that in the play, before I was cast in Conan. The only thing I'd done to that point with my very first thing was a student film at University of Southern California. And the gift he gave me was, he said, if you want to be an actor, learn to emulate. The guy walking down the street, the bartender, your mother. But don't try to imitate the way they move their hands or the way they walk. Don't try to imitate their voice. He said, reach into their soul. And if you can grab their soul, you will naturally speak the way they speak. You will naturally move the way they move. And so I practiced that. I mean, it's one of my techniques in creating character. And so when I got the call to go down to meet David Gordon Green to play this character, I watched the 1978 movie one time, and there's a particular scene where Nick is walking camera left to camera right as the Shape in the backyard, and in my head I went, I got it. I grabbed whatever that was Nick created. I grabbed it. So my process with this character was I wrapped myself with the blue ring of protection from Archangel Michael, because this is a very, very dark energy. It's a very real dark. This is not make-believe. Like, what's going on inside of me is not make-believe. I'm not pretending to be something. I am something. And so once I'm protected, I use breath. And, I invite your viewers to check out Max Strom, S-T-R-O-M, maxstrom.com. He teaches breathing. He's one of my dearest friends. We've been friends for 40-some-odd years. I mean, remarkable human being. The breath is so important. And so when I breathe that character in, all of a sudden, it's not me anymore. It's like I step aside and this other entity takes over. And what I do, so I'll do 5 takes, 10 takes, 15 takes, whatever. I'm in that space. There's enough of me there that if David needs to talk to me about what I need to do, or Paul, the camera operator says, Jimmy, I need your head like 1 inch over here, and I need you to catch that light. There's enough of me there to do that. But really, the totality of my being is not me. It's whatever that entity is. And I believe that I believe on a spiritual level, when we write characters, for instance, we're creating an energy. We're creating something that's a living, breathing being. So much so that when you do a family constellation therapy, for instance, and you have people who know nothing about the characters, they will tell you about your character. They will tell you things even that you don't know about your character. And so the important part of this is the protection and the breathing out that brings me back to me, and it's just me inside. And in fact, David Gordon Green told me in 2018, he said there was only one other actor who he'd worked with who could go as deep and dark as I was going, and he said that actor had a psychotic break. He ended up in a psych ward for 2 months because he couldn't handle the dark energy. So it's a very it's you'll have like a studio boss or some executive go, just put a mask on a stuntman. Furthest thing from the truth. Truly spoken by a person who could never do it themselves, but they don't have the concept of what it means to embody that kind of energy and what it does to you. I mean, what it does to your energy, what it does to your own body, and it's incredible.
And what does it do to your own body?
Well, your body believes everything that you're doing. I mean, so psychologically, emotionally, you're believing, you're living it. So your brain chemistry is being affected by it. Therefore, your cortisol levels, all your heart rate, all these things shift and change. You are in that moment, and so the effects of murder, and we know that killing affects. There have been tons of studies on military guys in firefights, the effects of psychopathy and psychopathic killers, and so when you're embodying that kind of energy, there has to be a discipline in there to keep one protected and safe, and to keep everybody else protected and safe. So there's a conscious process to it. It's not willy-nilly.
Yeah, and it's a very, very dark character. And you mentioned the blue light of protection from Archangel Michael. What exactly is that, and how does that work?
Well, I don't even remember where I learned that. I think I picked it up in the 80s, sort of with a groups of, various metaphysical groups and spiritual groups that I just sort of explored. And a friend of mine, Sandra Jasper, I think. Frank Jasper was one of my dearest friends as well. For some of your fans will remember him as Brian Shute in the movie Vision Quest. We did Conan together. And then he went on to be an acupuncturist, but he still makes appearances at wrestling tournaments around the world. But he and his wife Sanda is a spiritualist and a therapist. So there was a lot had to do with meditation and prayer and accessing the spiritual forces that surround us. And anybody who explores spirituality knows that there's most definitely a lighted side and there's a dark side. And so protection is really important, and Archangel Michael is one of the protectors. And as I understand it, Archangel Michael or angels will respond when called. And so I've been using that tool for, oh my God, decades. And in fact, a gentleman I know who is a former SEAL Team 6 leader and is now with the CIA has been using that technique for decades as well. And in fact, he used Archangel Michael. He's fought in 5 wars and has never lost a man. Not one of his SEAL Team 6 members was ever lost when he was using Archangel Michael to protect. So, I mean, it's powerful. It's really powerful. And, for some people, that's woo-woo, airy-fairy. It works for me, man. That's all I know.
Yeah, whatever works for you. And, I've spoken to a few near-death experience survivors and people that are very much into this sort of thing on this show. So it's not woo-woo here with this audience, but what does it, when this blue light comes and protects you, or the blue light of Archangel Michael comes to protect you, do you feel that? How does that feel? Is there a sensation, or is it more something you imagine, or how does that work?
As you're, and I really don't know that I've ever really thought about it, but yes, there's the sensation would be one of fullness, just a fullness, like there's a presence, and you know it, and I mean, I can tell you stories of even having someone call me from, someone who's in trouble and asking for, to pray or whatever, and do that thing, whatever that thing you're doing, just calling in Archangel Michael and asking him to assist somebody literally 5,000 miles away, and then getting a call back going, I don't know what the fuck you just did, but the guys with the guns just turned around and walked out. Like, how did that happen? But I think the more we access these spiritual tools, the easier, like any other tool, the easier it gets for us to use them. The better we get at using them. And that just happens to be one that I was gifted with, and I've used for a very, very long time. I use it when I drive. I use it, every time I get in the car. I wrap myself in a blue ring of protection. Every time I'm on my motorcycle. It works for me, but I think it also maintains for me a constant awareness that we are surrounded by spirit. We are surrounded by benevolent spirits who would love to see us succeed, want to see us happy, want to see us healthy. But like any other tool or a form of assistance, we have to be open to it, and we have to access it, and we have to utilize it. So I think it takes practice.
That makes complete sense. And do you believe in manifestation? A lot of people watching and listening to this are interested in the subject of manifestation. Is that something that you practice and believe in? And if so, how does that play a role in your life and with getting a role such as playing Michael Myers?
Absolutely, 100%. I think I started tapping into the concept when I was in high school. I read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And that started my mind working towards the idea that, if I was, with the mind of man and visions, a man creates, Marcus Aurelius, so I have used visualization and affirmation since my high school years. I used it, going out to Los Angeles, and it's kind of interesting in my life. Like if I really pursue something, like if I go after it like hardcore, whether it's a woman I want to date or a car I want to buy or a job like business, or it blows up my face. My job, I've discovered, is to clearly define for myself what I want, what I need, where I need to go, and then to be prepared to do the things I need to do to have in my toolbox, to be prepared to take that opportunity when it presents itself to me, to be the man that woman wants to meet, to be the guy that those people want to hire to to play this role. And in fact, one time this is way back in the day, but this is like 30 years ago, I knew I wanted a new car. I knew I needed a new car, and cars and motorcycles and things like that just come to me. Like literally, I'll decide what kind of car I want, and I'll get a call 3 weeks later, and someone will say, "Dude, you said you want such and such. Well, this guy's getting a divorce, and he's going to sell it for like half what it's worth. Do you want it?" I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens to me all the time. So I knew I needed a new car, but nothing was coming to me. And then I had a dream where Brad Pitt walks up to me in the dream and goes, "Dude, your new car hasn't come to you yet because you haven't decided what you want. You got to decide what you want before you can get it." And so then I went, "Oh, okay." So I decided I wanted a black Mercedes 300E. And boom, within a week, like I get a call from somebody like, "Hey man, for a car, there's a guy." And so with playing Michael Myers, and I did this for about 3 or 4 years. I don't know why I started doing this, but I'd be on my motorcycle, or I'd be in the gym working out, or, whatever. And I would say, James Jude Courtney is the next, and I'd leave it blank, because I knew the universe could fill that in better than I could. But I knew I was going to be the next something. I didn't know what that was going to be. And sure enough, I became the next Michael Myers. So I was the next something. I filled the shoes of a character that had been played by other people in the continuum of the Michael Myers saga. So I'm an incredible proponent of manifestation. And also, the other side of that is learning to be careful about my words and my visions and my emotions, in tough times, for instance, saying things like, "Oh, I can't afford that. I can't afford that." But then I started, and I started thinking about that. Wait a minute, what am I creating? I'm creating, I can't afford that. As opposed to saying, I choose not to allocate my resources to this right now. Because I've always had resources. No matter how down and out we are, we always have resources. It's just a matter of how we apply those resources. And we all have a finite level of resources. I don't care if you have $85 billion, you don't have 86. So you can only spend 85. You know what I mean? So, it's a double-edged, it's a two-sided coin. One is the positivity of manifestation, visualization, affirmation. The other is being very careful about what we are subconsciously creating on a negative level. And that's a lifelong process. And I'm still dealing with it.
As are most of us. That's something that a lot of people that are into manifestation don't talk about the other side of it. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. It's very interesting. And had you had you mentioned that you had a dream about Brad Pitt telling you about this car. Have you had any other dreams about things before they have happened? That type of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've had dreams where once, for instance, I was thinking about getting engaged to a woman I was dating, and I had a dream where I was at an altar and I was supposed to be marrying her, and she didn't show up. And it was very clear to me in the dream. It was like, oh, wait a minute, she's not the right one. And there was another woman who I dated for a long time, have a very, very, very wonderful relationship. And I had a dream where this woman and the one I was dating, were sitting on a couch, and a woman walks in with a suitcase, a Halliburton in her hand. She hands the suitcase out and says, "You will be leaving her soon." She and I both got up from the couch, and then the woman that I was dating just gracefully, like, opened her arm and just gracefully let me go. And sure enough, when we decided to redefine our relationship, it was one of the most graceful breakups I've ever had in my life. It was exactly the way the dream portrayed it. I mean, and there's been so many things. There have been dreams to warn me about people. I think the dream world, I don't do enough dream work. As we're speaking about this, I mean, because going to bed at night and programming dreams has been very beneficial to me in times. So, thank you for this, actually, because you're reminding me I need to do more dream work.
Well, it's such a fascinating phenomenon that it's happened to me throughout my whole life. It happens to a lot of people I've met and interviewed on this show. And where does that come from? Whether it's a dream or just your intuition telling you something, even if you're not dreaming and you're imagining it, and then it happens in real life, where does that come from, do you think?
I kind of think, right out of college, when I read my first Seth book, my first Jane Roberts book, it was The Nature of Personal Reality. And it was one of those books for my young mind that I would literally read 3 pages, and I'd then have to read those 3 pages again, and then I'd have to put it down because it was just so chock full of information. And the information that really resonated with me was other probable realities, multitudinous existence, the thought that there's maybe an infinite number of possibilities, that, maybe in another possible reality, I'm a doctor. Maybe another possible reality, I do all these different expressions. And then what that made me realize is the dream state, and I think Seth says this in one of his books, to our dream self, our waking self is just as enigmatic as for us waking selves looking at our dream self. There's this veil, there's this mist between the worlds, but they're full and rich and alive. They don't exist sometime, they exist all the time. We only access them occasionally. So I think there's probably, an incredible amount of research and work that could be done. We haven't even scratched the surface, I think, of understanding our dream selves. But the ancients do, the Aborigines, the Native Americans. I mean, indigenous peoples have been very tapped into, the dream life, and powerfully so. So, yeah, it's fascinating.
For yourself, you have obviously starred in these extremely popular movies. You've met a number and worked with a number of other very notable people, accomplished some incredible things in your life. So you mentioned it a couple times before, but how do you integrate your intuition and manifestation into your life? You mentioned speaking about it earlier. How does that happen mostly for you, would you say?
I think it's, I think like anything, we find we we discover ritual, we discover technique. Human beings, I think, are very susceptible in a very positive way to ritual, um, and to uh, and to learning techniques. Again, I go back to the breath. Man, there are.
Hmm.
I remember. So Max started teaching. He storied career. I mean, he should have played professional football, but when he hurt somebody, he decided to be a rock star. Stevie Ray Vaughan opened for him. Chris Isaac opened for him. Then he went, I don't like this anymore. He wrote 9 movies that were made, and then he went, I don't like this anymore. Then he became a yoga teacher, and now he teaches breath. Well, when he started teaching in my living room in Santa Monica, and we would occasionally do holotropic breathing after like an hour and a half of very strenuous vinyasa flow. We'd lay on our backs and do breath of fire. And, sometimes we did it for a very long time. One particular time we did breath of fire for over an hour. And I mean, if you did it standing up, you'd fall over and crack your skull. I mean, but we did holotropic breathing for literally an hour. And then he said, everybody hold your breath. And he had a stopwatch. Everybody in that room held their breath for 5 minutes at least. Several of us held a breath for over 9 minutes. We were so hyperoxygenated. We had so much prana, so much chi in our, built up in our bodies. So for me, whenever I start to focus on something, whether it be manifestation, whether I just need to just calm myself down, release anxiety or stress, or take another perspective on something, or I do it with the breathing. The breath always brings me to where I need to be. As soon as I focus on the breath, then everything else in my world gets focused as well. So that to me is the base of technique of everything. And it's kind of interesting because, if you look at, biblically, Genesis says, in the beginning was the Word, right? That's the way it opens. In the beginning was the Word. Well, what is the Word carried on? Words are carried on breath, So there's there's something to the grounding, centering, opening, ability of breath to take us where we need to be. So in a nutshell, man, that's my technique.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned that that the breathing is the basis of everything. For people that aren't familiar, what is breath of fire? What is this?
It's kind of funny because David Gordon Green practices it. Jamie Lee Curtis practices it. Wim Hof, Wim Hof, yeah, the guy who set records for being in ice baths for ridiculous amounts of time. He does it on breath. He does holotropic breathing. It's basically really intense. It's called breath of fire for a reason. Like, okay, this is what it's basically like. If I did it much longer, I'd fall over. I mean, you have to lay down to do it, and it's very powerful, but it innervates the entire system. So when you're laying down, then you carefully get up. That's when you can go into, and I do cold plunges. I do sauna and cold plunge, and that is what the difference between getting in 48-degree water and being able to hang out for a couple minutes because you have a strong will, and the difference between doing holotropic breathing and getting in 48-degree water and being completely comfortable for as long as you want to be in there. Night and day, what you can do. I mean,
Really?
it's so powerful. It's so powerful. And again, the beauty is, and I know this, Max has private clients, who are like, I mean, he has lots of clients like CEOs and political leaders, and he can take somebody who will go into deep anxiety, like who will just freeze because they have so much anxiety. 2 sessions with Max, done, because the breathing will take you out of anxiety. I mean, holotropic breathing, even just deep breathing, conscious breathing, will take us out of anxiety. It'll completely change our brain chemistry, our body chemistry. So it's a really I mean, it's just a really important tool that most people don't breathe. And it's kind of interesting. Max and I have talked about this. Many people don't even breathe when they're making love. They don't breathe while they're having sex. And that's the time when we should be breathing the most because we're so deeply connected spiritually with another being. So you know, deep breathing while we're making love, is an incredible way to connect on a spiritual level. And then if you understand, Taoist practices or tantric practices, you'll know that part of that is going to be breathing. It's all about breath.
That is very, very interesting about the breathing. I want to switch gears here real quick because we do interview on this channel quite a few lottery winners and people that have triumphed over the odds in various ways in life. And you obviously haven't literally won the lottery, but how does it compare when you get a star role in an A-list movie such as this Halloween series? How does it compare getting a role like that, would you say, to winning the lottery? Can it be compared? What do you think?
I don't know because I've never won a lottery, but I think an interesting difference would be depending on the person. For instance, you believe in manifestation. So if you were manifesting this, if you're actively manifesting the universe bringing you what you desired, and it happened to come in the form of a lottery, and you listened to your intuition, you listened to your dream state, you paid attention, right? So you are an active participant in the manifestation of that lottery. I think that is would be very close to what it is I experience in actively manifesting this particular gold mine that has been showered, that I've entered, that is a part of my life now. I would think for a person who didn't actively co-create this, but subconsciously maybe was just a part of it, but then out of the blue comes this, this windfall. I would imagine that would be quite unsettling. In fact, there's something called lottery syndrome, where people win lotteries and they get very, very sick because it's such a shock to the system. The exact same shock that it would be if they lost a child in a car accident or they went through a horrible divorce, even though winning a lottery can be a very powerful and positive thing. So I think the difference really is, knowing that you and there are people like you who have actively participated in the manifestation of a lottery win. I would think that you and I have a very similar response to it because immediately, for me, it wasn't like I wasn't jumping up and down and going, yeah, I got it raw. It was more like, okay, dude, I got business to take care of now, man. I got work to do. Like, I'm focused. This is a responsibility. This is, yeah, it's going to be fun. I live for this. I live for this. It's the most fun I ever have in my life, but I'm focused now, man. I've got, and I think the same thing when you win the lottery. It's like with that money comes responsibility. And, with any powerful experience in life, if we let it control us, it can be profoundly destructive, right? But if we take it seriously and take a responsibility seriously, it can be incredibly joyful and enjoyable. And then we understand, which I'm sure you have, and I'm sure people you've interviewed have, the opportunity for benevolence in this, the opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives because of what we've been blessed with is just monumental. And and the fact that I get to be a part of other human beings' joy, and I get to do it a lot, it's incredible. I mean, it's whether it's just meeting a fan and or signing an autograph, or there's so many opportunities and charity events that I get to be a part of, and knowing that in some way, shape, or form, because of this thing that manifested in my life, I get to then be a conduit for greater joy and greater love and greater healing in the world around me. And that's why I think you and I are very similar in this. And so I think we had a very similar experience, It just manifested in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And you said so many things there that it seems so wise, like your perspective. And you mentioned at the beginning lottery syndrome, which I believe that I was initially affected with something called sudden wealth syndrome, which was a psychological term, but there were some negative aspects for the perspective. But one very positive, I don't feel that way anymore, but one very positive thing is how you can affect other people, like you were mentioning. And you go to conventions all over the United States, perhaps all over the world. I don't know, but you have so many fans out there that love you and love this, what you've done and are continuing to do. What is it like once you have starred in these movies? What is it like to have the outpouring of support from horror fans and from fans in general?
I mean, first of all, like for me, making movies, I'm a process-oriented person. So I'm in it for the process. I'm in it to do the work. I don't like watching myself and on the screen. I'm not that impressed with myself, so I don't look at myself as like a star, or I just happen to do something well enough that somebody's willing to pay me to do it. You know what I mean? That's kind of my perspective. So, I never thought about, oh, I'm playing this iconic character, or I'm getting to star in a movie opposite Jamie Lee Curtis, and I didn't think about that. I'm mission oriented, so I just worked on the mission. So I wasn't prepared for the amount of love that I received. And you go to conventions, people stand in line, and they get their couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes with you, and get to exchange some niceties. Sometimes you have a little conversation with people. Sometimes people are clammed up because they're nervous. But it's all love all day long, and it really feeds me. Like the energy of love. It's just I've had people wait in line 9 hours to meet me. Like I mean, some of us who played ball, basketball, baseball, football, when we were kids, and after a game, the coach takes you to a Dairy Queen, and you get an ice cream cone. When I was a kid, I would see the line and go, I'm not standing in line with 40 other kids. I got ice cream at home. I'll see you guys. I'm gone. So I've never been one to stand on cue for this or that. It's just not my nature. And so to see, like, look in front of me and see a line, like I was in Manchester, England, signing autographs, several months ago, and as far as I could see, the line was, and Nick Castle and I are always next to each other when we do conventions together, and the lines are just incredible, and it's just love. It's just love all day long, and the thing of it is, it's love from every imaginable human you can fathom. I mean, everything, every race, religion, nationality, sexual orientation, anything that you could define somebody as being different than another person, every one of those people show up in these lines. And from ER docs to cops to firefighters to plumbers to millionaires, the millionaire lottery winners. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And so after meeting, 700, 800, 1,000 people in a weekend, that's a lot of love, man. That's a lot of love. And for that, I am eternally grateful. It's incredible. I would wish that everybody could feel that kind of love. And sometimes it's overwhelming. Sometimes it brings me to tears sometimes, And then my partner, Sarah, she's, usually I have assistant, like I'll have an assistant, but Sarah has always wanted to be a part of this, and she's multilingual. She speaks French, and she's from England. She speaks sign language, and so she will communicate with deaf people when they come up to the table. I've literally seen. Wow. I mean, I can do simple things like, nice to meet you. Do you want your name, or how do you spell your name, or whatever. But she can communicate, not fluently, but she can communicate. And I've literally seen, like, one time she was talking to a husband and wife, and the woman turned to her husband and signed, "Oh my God, they can speak to us." And tears shot straight out of her eyes. And I went, oh my God, the opportunity to be a part of bringing that kind of joy to another human being, like, how's it get any better than that, man? You know?
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, that would feel just amazing. I think just it seems like we're all connected. That would just feel incredible. With people that are watching or listening to this today, because you have achieved your own dreams, and you continue to achieve extraordinary things in your life. What advice would you give to anyone watching or listening that are hoping to achieve their own dreams, to turn those into reality?
I think the very first thing that a person needs to look at in terms of what their dreams are is being honest about their talent. You know, for instance, if your dream is to be an Olympic sprinter, but you run an 18-second 100-yard dash, probably not going to be an Olympic sprinter. So, I mean, I think we have to be honest about where our talents lie. You know, I'm not as good at math as I am at English and history. I have some talents and I'm very deficient in other areas. You know, I think hard work matters even more than talent, because hard work will take what is potential talent and to make it manifest into something that's viable and practical and real. In fact, hard work will even trump a lack of talent. You can have a lack of talent, but if you work hard enough, you can get good at something and just, you know, but at the end of the day, persistence is omnipotent. Once you define what it is you want to do, and I think that a really important part of that formula is finding a way to be of service. So taking our talent, like saying, I have this talent. How can I be of service to my family, my community, the country, the world, the environment? You know, because, I mean, Think and Grow Rich talks about this too. I mean, you know, all these great teachers have talked about, you know, if you want to build a business, find something your community needs. What does your community not have that you can provide? And if you can provide something to your community or your country or whatever that they need, first of all, you're doing a spiritual service. And secondly, someone's going to pay you for it. Someone will pay you to do what you do. And so, you know, the discipline of talent, hard work, persistence, it has to have a focus. And I think that focus, when it comes from the desire to be of service, is the highest focus that we can, and that will, you know, like paraphrasing Goethe, you know, like once you commit to something, elements will come from places you didn't even know existed that will fill your sails. And the next thing you know, you're sailing out of reach, meaning that you're sailing faster than the wind. You're creating your own wind. You know, but nothing's going to happen, you know, sitting our butts on the couch, you know, watching TV all day. That's, you know, I mean, watching television is awesome. You know, but I think, you know, if we're going to allow ourselves to be manipulated by the sensationalism of the news, for instance, if we're going to be manipulated by victim mentality and, you know, people telling us that we're being victimized by this and that, you know, victimization is disempowerment. You know, empowering ourselves. And when you have a mission to serve, you're automatically empowered. You're automatically empowered because it's not about our egos anymore. It's about what can I give to that person or this community. So my dad used to say all the time, he used to say, winners never quit, quitters never win. So like our rules were as kids is like, if you join football this season, you got to play the season out. Basketball, whatever, baseball, you know, whatever we did, martial arts, whatever, you can't quit. Here's the deal. You committed for this amount of time. And I think that's a really important part of the discipline of persistence. You know, it's not magic. It's, you know, there's a friend of mine who in his 20s controlled 5% of the New York Stock Exchange. And the way he did that was he went to work at a hedge fund and he decided he wanted to learn a trade, and no one seemed interested in teaching him. So he showed up for work 4 hours early every single day, 5 days a week, and stayed 3 hours after work every single day and taught himself to trade on the practice computer. And when he finally mastered it, he eventually was given the opportunity, earned the opportunity, and because he was, so at the end of the day, he and I have talked about this. Success looks a whole lot like hard work. But if you love what you're doing, it's not hard work. He loved being on that computer 7 hours a day. He was doing that job so that he could have that time on that computer. I love doing what I do. Man, my life is so perfect when I'm in front of the camera. I have never had a bad day on a movie set. Never. 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 I mean, if my life, the rest of my life could work the way it works for me when I'm on a movie set, oh my God, I'd probably die of joy. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's what we should all strive for. Living the dream, and the persistence and the discipline. So many people that are successful in life really swear by that. Successful athletes, actors such as yourself, all kinds of professions. How much would you say that the visualization and self-belief play into that as well?
It's a huge part of it. I mean, when you look at an Olympic skier before she's going to make a slalom run, sitting at the top of that mountain with her eyes closed, and you can see her moving through each turn. I'm blessed to know, more than a few college athletes here at the University of South Carolina. Friends with a few of them, and of course I have friends who are professional athletes, and visualization is a key part of what they do. I mean, it's a key part of it's how I work on characters. It turns out Tom Hanks does the same thing. When I'm working on a character, I'll get on my motorcycle or in my car and I'll just drive. I'll just ride. I'll just go away. I have literally ended up hours away from home, not even knowing how I got there. I'll just visualize. And feel and allow my imagination to take me where it's going to take me, and then sort of make notations of what it is I've just experienced. Because the creative aspect of who we are, I mean, it doesn't come from me. It comes from the universe. I think we're just downloading. I mean, even Keith Richards said that back in the day. I mean, between the heroin and the cigarettes and the whiskey and everything else he had in his system, he was asked about where's it come from? And he was right. Yeah, it's not me. I just got to get out of the way so it can come through me. And then the question is, what is it coming through? This is an instrument. This is my instrument. So
your body is the instrument. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So Keith Richards' job was to grind away at his guitar long enough to have a refined instrument that could come through. Because if he'd only picked up a guitar 3 or 4 times in his life, he never would have played the way he played. But arguably one of the best guitarists in rock and roll, and it's because he put in the time, he persisted, and he's smart enough to know that it's not him, that it's something else. And that divine energy, whatever that is, that divine wind is, and again, it goes back to, I think, when we were raised, like I was raised in a Catholic school, and, we were taught, well, the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Well, I kind of, as a kid, I thought about that, and I was like, well, okay, if this body is a temple, that means it's a building, right? It's something, it's a vehicle. Well, what kind of vehicle would I want a spirit to be in? And this is one of the reasons why I train hard. It's why I take care of my body. I'm in the gym 6 days a week, and I do all the other things, yoga and hiking and a million other things that I do for my health. I mean, the supplements I take, the food I eat, because this is my instrument, and how I take care of my instrument is going to be reflected in my work and in my everyday life. And at this age, I'm 67 years old, but I still have the physical capacity of doing my own stunts and portraying a physically powerful character, and that's because I've done the work over the years for decades.
Absolutely, and it's very impressive. And this role that you had with the Michael Myers, and many of the roles as a stuntman that you've had as well, they are very, very physical roles. Is there anything that happened in this Michael Myers series that was behind the scenes that the average fan watching doesn't know about that you think that we should? That was any anecdotal stories or crazy stories? What goes on? Because we all wonder.
It's kind of interesting. So you have like 130 people working on a movie, and it's one of the few professions where you say you hire 130, 180 people, and everybody who shows up to work knows exactly what they're doing. You don't have to train anybody. Everybody knows what they're doing, and it's like an anthill. Everybody moves, and then and when you roll tape, everybody stops. As soon as you hear cut, everybody moves. It's like this. It's this amazing, amazing experience in the cohesiveness that happens on a set. And I've heard of some movie sets and television shows being toxic and painful and unforgiving, but I've never experienced that. I have experienced incredible joy and familial camaraderie, especially on Halloween. We all had the sense that we've done this before, that we were some community or marched into battle together or we're some Shakespearean troupe together or something. We all had the experience of that. I think I can say, for instance, that there's a part in Halloween 2018, we're shooting a scene, Jamie and I, it was a fight scene, and she has a rifle, a long gun, and she runs out of bullets, so she flips it around, and she's going to use it like a baseball bat. And I'm holding a knife, down in my hand, and she's supposed to bat it out of my hand. And I'm thinking, oh, Jesus. Because normally, actors are not good to fight with. Most actors can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. And I'm really surprised that actors don't spend more time learning how to control their bodies. It's the biggest instrument they have. But most actors really are not really good at things like fighting and driving cars and, all that good stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, man, this is going to be a broken hand. 30 takes. And she nailed that knife every single time on a full hardcore swing. And then when we fought and wrestled and, boom, down to the ground, no pads, so what that speaks to is her dedication. Like, that woman is 100% in. And then, there's a scene where she shot me in Halloween 2018. So she shoots me the gun, shoots me in my left shoulder. I spin around, I drop to the ground, I get back up. We rehearsed it. I knew exactly how I was going to spin around, exactly where. I knew exactly how far I was going to squat to get out of the camera and then pop back up. Well, when, adrenaline being what it is, so the battery pack for the squibs, the explosions of blood on me, the battery pack was on my left butt cheek. It was on my left, and it was going to be fine. There's plenty of room. When I spun around, I spun so hard, I dropped so hard that I hit that battery pack on the concrete. It jammed into my sit bone, and it gave me a hematoma. So it was very painful. But of course, we're working, man. There's no time for pain. Pop up, and I walk, and then the next. So it was a night shoot. Go to sleep. I wake up and I felt like I got out of bed and I could barely move. It was so painful. And I was like, oh my, what I felt like was, this is the thought that came to me. It's like, I just played in the Super Bowl and I got the shit kicked out of me, but we won. And the feeling of having accomplished something and having worked through that pain that night, turns out it was a hematoma. So at a certain point, because I started going to a chiropractor and an acupuncturist every day before work, and they would put needles all the way around my butt cheek. It took a week for the bruising to come out. And the chiropractor, she measured it. My left butt cheek was a full inch higher than my right butt cheek. It was so swollen. It was.
Oh my gosh!
But it's a part of what you're doing, man. So in the last one in the tunnel scene when Rowan Campbell and I were fighting, very talented actor. Wow, this kid, he's going places, man. He's going places. He slammed me down so hard because it was concrete. I got a mild concussion, and one of the times he slammed me down, he heard something. He goes, "Dude, what was that?" And it's like, that was my spine. he gave me like a full adjustment. My whole spine went brrr, like, and one of those body slams. But that's you train for that. You train your body for that. You train your mind for that. And again, it's about something other than me. It's about being there for this other 130 people on that set. Every one of us is getting everything we have. So when it becomes about the mission, any discomfort or pain that I'm feeling is irrelevant. I think it's really important, whether it be our family, our community, our job. And if we can't feel that about what we're doing for a living, I think we should find something else to do for a living. I think being fulfilled in life is really, really important.
Well, that is beautiful. That seems very, very wise. We are here with James Jude Courtney. I'm so excited to have you here today. Where can people find out more about you, or find you attend conventions around the world? Where can people find more about you?
We do some limited post. We post on Instagram, Facebook, that kind of stuff. I will start posting from this point forward. I'll start posting when I'm going to be at a convention. So if people want to check out my Instagram, they can know where they can find us.
Well, we will put a link to that in the description of this video, or in the show notes if you're listening to this on audio, to your Instagram, definitely. And just because you mentioned that you are a filmmaker and you're you're seeking to get these movies produced, what exactly are they? Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
The soccer film, which I've put quite a bit, it's been very well received from Academy level people in the industry. And so with my soccer film, I looked at it and went, it's a universal. I'm not going to tell the story here, but it's a universal story, and it's a story about the struggles that families go through, and some very, very real struggles with addiction and with depression and the number of human beings in this world who do not realize their potential because they're waiting for somebody else to give them permission. When in reality, we have to give ourselves permission to be who we really are. We have to give ourselves permission to actually believe that we can accomplish something, that we can be good at something, that we have something to offer, and that we deserve to have a bank account with zeros in it, that we deserve to have enough money, whatever that means to us, to put food on the table, to feel comfortable, to support our families, to help other people when they're in need. And so, the mission behind this, and this film is called Next Level, the mission with this is to bring something out in theaters. So I think we're at this moment right now, we're alive at a very, very special time for me and for my partners to make a film that is not only going to make impact, but it's going to make our investors a ton of money, which then, of course, allows us the privilege of making more movies that can make impact, that can, reach into society and touch minds and hearts and lives and make our investors money. And then we get to, it's this continuum of positivity, I think, that we can create.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love your positive outlook, and your mentality is really impressive. James Jude Courtney, thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything else that you want to say today that I don't know enough to ask, or that you just want to say today?
My friend, I think you and I are probably going to have many more conversations. So, I think this has been great. And thank you for the forum. I think it's so important for us to share our belief systems. There are so many people out in the world who are seekers, who truly desire to live a better, more fulfilling life. And I think it's really important for us, to share these things, our path, whether it has meaning for someone or not, or whether it's the path they would choose or not, but opening people up to new ideas. And I think part of it too is to let people know, like, look, man, that wasn't an accident. And so I think maybe letting people know that life is not an accident. There are no such things as accidents. There's cause and effect. And we have way more power in the causal realm to create that effect than we would know. And I think that, so I applaud you, my friend, for doing what you're doing, because every single person that gets to listen to you and see you has the opportunity to be touched by, the truth you're bringing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That means a lot. I really, really appreciate that. And I really, really appreciate your time here today as well. It seems like you're so fascinating, so wise, and I love listening to your spiritual beliefs and all of your anecdotal stories and all of this. I want to give a big shout out to Sarah for helping facilitate this, connect us in the first place behind the scenes. James Jude Courtney, it was such a pleasure to have you here on the show today. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well, my friend. You do a great job, and I'm excited to be a part of your journey, man. Much love.
Yeah, much love. Thank you so much.
We want to think about what we want to achieve. So if it's winning the lottery, we want to imagine that, and we might pick a scenario. We might pick the moment of seeing the readout on the scan that says winner.
Within the dream, I had already won the lottery. Like, it had already happened, and it was so real.
Subconscious mind can't differentiate between that which is real and that which has been vividly imagined.